This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. J.Lo said you had to be born in New York to be a New Yorker, and I have not stopped thinking about it. Because as someone who moved here in 2015 with one suitcase, no job, and not knowing a single person, I had a very immediate, visceral reaction, which was absolutely not. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized I wasn't just reacting to a New York take, I was reacting to a much bigger question. Who gets to decide where we belong? But first, let me tell you about my week. Hi, it's me, Saskia, and welcome back to Note to Self. Alrighty, guys. So, what's been going on with my week? I cannot stop thinking about Belmont Camel. How do you say his last name? Whatever. Belmont from Off Campus. We know him. We love him. He's the lead in Off Campus. And there is this video that has been going viral on the internet. And it is him dancing to the live performance of Girls, the song that is in the show that he dances to. And the performer, Kid Leroy, I don't fucking know. This is like the Gen Z stuff that I don't get. Anyways, he's performing the song Girls live. Belmont joins him. And girl, when I tell you, I sat here and I literally screamed. Jeffrey had to come out and check if I was okay. I was like, what the fuck is happening? When he puts the sunglasses away and he does that dance, lifts up his shirt, I fucking melted away. And honestly, I tell you what, the more I've watched it, I've probably watched it over 25 times at least. The more I've thought about it, thank God he wore those sexy fucking cargo pants, because without them, he couldn't have put his sunglasses away to perform the sexiest goddamn dance that I have seen since Channing Tatum. And you know what they say about cargo pants, guys? You can never have too many pockets. So I'm really glad he was wearing those pants. Oh my God, he's so fucking hot. It's not okay. Sorry, Jeffrey, I have a crush. It's consuming me. It is consuming me. So that video is living in my head rent-free. It is my Roman Empire. It is my new Roman Empire. I don't stop thinking about it. Don't stop talking about it. God, fuck, what a hot song. What a hot man. God, trying to dance like that? Oh, okay, I gotta move on. I'm just gonna spend the whole podcast just salivating over this young man. Moving things back around, though, to dancing. Summer really is well and truly here. I said that last week with the kickoff of Love Island, but my other kind of marker of summer is when you go to a party under the K Bridge, which I had mentioned last week I was going to. Oh my God, guys. Gotta say, we saw Chris Lake, who's becoming pretty big. I believe he's from the UK. And he was meant to do a show Saturday night, but there was this crazy storm that came in. So the storm canceled the show, and then it ended up turning the Saturday show into like a big Sunday party. They were going to do like a small Sunday party, but they just like made it a whole thing, made it like the regular party. But oh my fucking God, it was such a good show. The weather was pristine, so perfect. This venue is my favorite venue in New York. It's outdoors and it's under these two big bridges, and you have this like beautiful sunset that comes through the like all the pillars, and it shines off the pillars. It creates this like super otherworldly feeling. And I swear to God, when I tell you, I have never seen a crowd just so dialed into the music. Everyone was losing their minds. Even Chris was like, you guys are going so hard on a Sunday, and I love it. Like, it was just, the energy was just palpable. And I have not danced that hard in so long. I swear to God, this other version of myself came out, which is like, when the music is good, your girl really dances. She goes hard. And I was with two girls from Miami, and they're like, girl, you might be a Miami girl. And I was like, that might be the best thing that someone said to me. So got to dance like one of the Miami girls. But it was so much fun. And well, the start of the night before Chris Lake came out, we were all just, I don't know how it happened. We all just like randomly started FaceTiming someone from our family, and they'd pick up and it would just be like the five of us, or no, Jeffrey wasn't there yet. So it was the four of us, and we were on the dance floor, and we were just like, wow, like, da, 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 like going wild, and just seeing the joy on every single person's face. We called my sister, my mom, we called everyone else's mom or dad. And every time they picked up, we couldn't hear anything they were saying. It was just this like immediate joyful smile, just seeing all of us just being so silly and dancing and yelling. It was so beautiful. And I think just that connection I had with the people, or like my people I went with, and then calling our families and all the people around us. And I just kept thinking like the energy in this city right now is just on another level. I am telling you. I think partly it's due to the Knicks being in the finals, but like I feel this deep connection with everyone in the city right now. And everyone's just so excited and happy. And it kind of reminds me of New York pre-COVID. And there was just a lot of joy. And a girlfriend said to me recently when we were out at a rave, she says, the biggest form of resistance is connection. And I just thought, wow, that's what I think is happening right now. There's a lot of shit going on in this world, but New York is a very special place, and we are all coming together, and I think it's our own form of resistance. And look what we are showing the world. This city and that fucking team, the Knicks, that came back from fucking nothing, for those that did watch the game, they were down by so many points. I don't even like watch sport, and I just thought it was such a powerful story of just determination and what it can do when a community comes together. Just great. It is a great energy in this city right now, guys, and you can clearly feel it from my vibes. High vibes here, high vibes. But I'm not going to hold you forever in my intro. Let's move on to pop culture pick of the week. And I'm kicking things off strong with obviously what I kind of hinted to in my intro, which is an Instagram video of an interview on the Subway Takes account. So for those who don't know Subway Takes, it's an internet talk show hosted by Kareem Rama. It's pretty cool. He's like kind of taken, well, this is how I think of it, is he's taken that late night talk show that is really going away. And the late night talk shows always have interviews, right? And I feel like he's turned this social media series into what is an interview format, and it only lives on social. And I just think a lot of the stuff that we see that were these original like late night hosts and are moving to more of these creators, and props to him because he's killing it. All of his interviews are filmed on the New York subway, and Kareem always asks, so what's your take? And guests respond with an array of different takes that are oftentimes controversial, other times not. But it can be anything from, I don't think men should sit down on the subway, to raise a family is easy, to, this was one of my faves, that straight white men should stop trying to be DJs. So good. Yet I did go and see a straight white male DJ on Sunday. But Chris Lake, you killed it. What can I tell you? And there were some girlies that opened for him, so love that. But most recently, he interviewed J.Lo. And her take was, I quote, "You have to be born in New York to be a New Yorker." And Kareem actually agreed with her, which I thought was interesting considering he's probably one of the most influential media voices in New York right now. And he was not born and raised in New York. And I would consider him a very influential New Yorker right now. I digress. My first thought was immediately, this is literally a city of immigrants. This city is built by immigrants. There's a lot of people who were born and raised here, but there's a lot of people who were not, who have built this city. And they were not born here. And I think the reason people come here is because it's so welcoming. The joy and beauty of New York is the fact that it's made up of so many different people. So I started to reflect on this more, and I thought to myself, what do I think makes a New Yorker? And I have 3 points for you. So, number one, New York is built by people who arrived. As I said, the reason New York feels like New York is because people come here from everywhere. They bring their food, their ambition, their sadness, their art, their pain, their languages, their families, their loneliness. That is the magic of this city and what makes it so different. It is this melting pot of people from everywhere. So saying that you're a New Yorker because you were born here kind of defeats the whole purpose of this city, I feel. Number 2, New York is where people go when they don't belong anywhere else. New York, I think, is a place where a lot of people go who haven't felt like they could be themselves in other places. It's a city that I think if you're willing to, walk through the fucking muck, the trash, the rats, the crazy people, it will welcome you and it will embrace you. And you can really be whoever you want to be. I've seen it transform myself. I have seen it transform friends. I have said to friends that were moving here, you will be transformed. And I've witnessed it happen. And I think it's really enables a lot of us to have the creative expression and freedom to become who maybe we have always been, but weren't able to be in other places. And number 3, belonging is not a suffering contest. I think what bothers me the most about this subway take and this conversation is that it's turning belonging into a suffering contest, as if the person who had it the hardest gets the strongest claim. And I really believe in a thing called the problem complex, which really means that no matter who you are or what your situation is, you're going to have problems in your life. And just because maybe your problems aren't quote unquote as hard as someone else's, it doesn't diminish what is happening for you. I think we've all dealt with crazy shit in our lives, and we've all, no matter where you grow up, had things that you had to overcome. And I just think it's funny that I often find with born and raised New Yorkers, there's this ego, and honestly, not even just born and raised New Yorkers who've lived here forever too, but there's an ego around like how hard it is or how long you've been here, how long you've suffered, and that growing up here, you've suffered the most. And I actually really encourage people to go listen to my podcast episode where I interviewed a close friend of mine who's a food historian and an author, Victoria Flexner, and she was born and raised in New York on the Bowery. And we speak a lot about her childhood and how different it was from mine. I always found her story so fascinating to me. But for her upbringing was normal. That was her normal. And she says, learning about my childhood is crazy to her. She's like, you had to deal with like crocodiles and snakes and all these crazy animals just living with you essentially. And I'm like, yeah, but I just didn't think about it because that was my normal. So it's this whole idea of suffering. Like, what is suffering? Which is worse? Her getting up and having like hookers outside her apartment building as a child and the mafia around the streets, or me waking up and seeing a, crocodile that could kill you in the river where we lived. There were hundreds of them, or snakes in the rafters that fell down on my mom when I was a baby. Like, we're both dangerous. So, I think it's just a funny sentiment to think that like, I don't feel like you having been born somewhere automatically gives you the right to say that that is the only way that you can be from there. And I guess that kind of ties into the comment that I actually left on the video. And I said, as someone who grew up in Australia to immigrant parents, I've never really felt at home. We have family all over the world, so no one place has ever felt like my place. Until I moved to NYC in 2015. I immediately fell in love with the city, and it felt like a place that finally understood me. I wouldn't be who I am today without having lived here, and I may not be born and raised in New York, but moving here with no suitcase, no job, not knowing a single person, I like to think I have what it takes to be a New Yorker. So to me, that's the sign of a New Yorker. It takes fucking guts to live here. And it may have been hard being born and raised here, but do you have any idea how hard it is coming here with no job, like I said, and not knowing anyone, and you just walk in fully blind, especially people who come from other countries, having to work out bank accounts and like health insurance. God, that's the worst. All those things, you have no fucking clue how hard that is when you are having to move to this city and then do all of that as well. That's fucking hard. So if you're not going to give me a pass for doing that, I'm not going to give you a pass for growing up here. So honestly, props to all the people who have moved to New York and immigrated to New York. The city is not easy, and I don't think being born here and suffering through growing up here earns your belonging. I actually think if you stay and you contribute to the city, you contribute to the energy of this incredible place in a meaningful way. You live your life fully in service to who you really are at your core, then I think that makes you a New Yorker. And ultimately, being born somewhere and belonging somewhere are not the same thing. Period. Guys, I'm on one today. We're moving on. But almost perfectly in the other direction, I finished Lena Dunham's memoir, Famesick, and it made me think about the other side of this. And this is my second pop culture pick of the week. Because yes, New York can be a place that makes you, but what happens when the place that made you also broke you and is the place you need to leave? So this was something that really is I wouldn't say, I'm trying to think, it's like not string, but it's like the kind of underlying theme you start to see develop throughout Lena's memoir. And I think the book shows a lot of the suffering that she had inside her life living here. The health issues, the misdiagnoses, her pain not being taken seriously. I mean, the book starts out really with her being in college. She's living downtown. She grew up in New York. Her parents were artists, and she's part of this creative lower Broadway world. They had this big building that all these creatives were working out of. They were all very young in their careers. People like the Safdie brothers were there, Greta Gerwig, a lot of the people we see who are big at this day. And Lena was making her first film, Tiny Furniture, which eventually led to her creating Girls. So this was a very specific version of Lena. And I think if she hadn't had all of that, Girls wouldn't have been possible and the beautiful art that she has created. But like I said, behind all of that and what a lot of the book focuses on is her suffering. Because despite, all the success, she had media scrutiny and she had the responsibility of hundreds of people depending on her while she was just a young woman in her 20s trying to figure herself out. And I thought about that. I was like, fuck, imagine me being here in my 20s and I was just like figuring it out. And then I was responsible for 200 people's livelihoods. That's fucking scary. Like that is so much pressure for a young person. And the way I read the book and what I garnered from it was that a lot of the people that she was working for kind of just considered her a cash and creative cow. It was just milking her and milking her and milking her until she really just had nothing left to give and her entire body shut down. You find out in the book that, her whole life she's been living with this chronic illness or with chronic illness generally. She never really knew what it was. She was just this kid that was always sick. And these started to result in kind of long-term health struggles where she, at 31, had a hysterectomy, which is fucking wild. She was having the most insane endometriosis pain throughout her 20s, just so many issues with her uterus. She said she felt like her uterus was like an alien inside of her. So heartbreaking. And I think with that, she was often on a lot of pain medication because she was always having to work. So they would just put her on pain medication so she was able to work, which resulted in an addiction to pain meds and had an eating disorder problem. So all these things are wrapped up. The health stuff was just heartbreaking. This poor woman who just had been like given so much painkillers. This is like the whole story of like the opioid crisis in the US. She's a perfect example of someone they just kept giving pain meds to until she was reliant on it and had to go to rehab. But anyways, I think within the story, you end up finding out that a friend of hers had read her first book where she's starting to kind of talk through some of her pain. And the woman somehow was able to reach out to Lena and asked her if she had ever heard of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because the woman had felt like the symptoms that Lena was listing was very similar to this type of syndrome. It's this like super rare genetic condition. So she was able to find out that yes, she has had that. It's something she was born with apparently. And it's a lot of the reason why she's had a lot of like chronic pain most of her life and has really suffered for so long. You find out, ultimately how things were able to be figured out. I wouldn't say resolved because it's an illness you live with for the rest of your life. But ultimately, you kind of see that a lot of her time in New York was just tied to a lot of pain and just this really difficult time in her life. And I think this ultimately, led to her moving to London, where she lives today and where she met her husband. And London really became the place, I think, where she could breathe and where she could be a different version of herself. She didn't have to be this image that had been crafted in New York and these expectations that were put on her, and then just all the pain and suffering she'd had there. And I think the key takeaway reading it for me was the realization of her love for New York, but also that New York was not good for her and she needed to leave. She needed to be somewhere else. And New York was kind of a part of her becoming, but it couldn't be the place where she needed to heal. I just really encourage people to read Fame Sick. Beyond what I discussed above, I found it to be such a fascinating depiction of fame and the Hollywood lifestyle, like this glitz and glam that were all sold. Her memoir really took the glamour away, and this idea that they live the most glamorous lifestyles, these celebrities, it just really revealed to me all the hard work, which we know there is hard work, but I think a lot of the pain that comes with the attention. And once you have the attention, the fear of losing it. And I think that was such an interesting title choice, The Fame Sick, because I think a lot of that was tied into it too, of wanting to be seen and be important. And that fueled her. And in the same vein, also fueled her sickness. But really, moving beyond the pop culture picks of the week, what I really wanted to talk about today is the strange and very disorienting process of redefining yourself in your 30s, which Lena also went through as well. I'm finding myself more and more questioning my purpose and questioning what I want my life to look like, what I want in my life. I don't have answers to this, but I do have areas I've been diving into throughout this process that I want to share that I think are part of this reinvention and that I think a lot of us go through in our 30s, and I don't necessarily hear a lot of people talking about it. So first, I want to discuss how I'm finding identities that used to serve me are starting to feel too small or they're changing. So when I think about who I am, I said it earlier in the episode, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be who I am without New York. New York gave me so much of myself. It gave me creative freedom. It gave me independence. It gave me love. It gave me the feeling that I could be whoever I wanted to be. But I think I'm starting to realize that the version of me who needed New York in my 20s and when I moved here at 23 is not necessarily the same version of me who exists now, nor is it the same New York that I need now. What I need is different. When I first moved here, let's go back in time. I was a city girl through and through. I never went to Brooklyn, or if I did, it was very rare, usually Williamsburg. I pretty much didn't go above 14th Street. I was a Manhattan girl through and through, and God, I was so proud of it too. I was so proud of it. I loved saying that I lived in Manhattan. First, I lived in Chinatown, then I was in Little Italy, and I was just right in the thick of it. I was able to go to all the coolest lounges, all the coolest bars. You'd be bopping around in your little heels and strutting down the street like you owned the New York sidewalk, bloody crossing celebrities left, right, and center. I truly felt like I was Carrie Bradshaw. And we were going out all the time, always at bars, always chatting to boys, just bopping around. It was a very different lifestyle. I was a lot less tired. And I just remember going to all the cool gyms and the Pilates studios and the yoga and whatever the new workout trend was. It was just that cool downtown New York lifestyle. And, I start to think of the girl who arrived to that. And that girl who came here, she was so young. She was from Australia. She was wearing her Jeffrey Campbell Litas. I remember I'd be wearing the highest heels. I was wearing these very funny Australian outfits that were not the style here. But I just remember always knowing I wanted more. Where I grew up was just too small. And so I immediately left to go to Brisbane for university. And then when I finished my university, Brisbane felt too small. And I always knew that after Brisbane, I was going to go to New York. I had said from a very young age that New York was where I wanted to be. I thought I knew what city life was, but I had no idea. I had grown up in a very natural environment. It was so beautiful and quiet and peaceful, but I was craving chaos. And I think I just wanted to feel more alive and be in the thick of it and feel like I was at the center of the world, that I was in it and I was a part of it. And now I look at myself, 10, nearly 11 years since I moved here, and the version of myself has all these elements of the previous identities, but this new identity is much harder to define. And I think maybe that's part of the discovery. I don't have to define what it is, because I think the older we get, the more parts of ourselves we start to discover, or the more parts we start to add to ourselves. I mean, hell, like I said, over the weekend, your girl's other dance alter ego came out. So she lies dormant in there too, but when the right music comes on, she comes out. I love her. I got to create a name for her. But I think that's maybe what's exciting, is that I think I'm starting to feel the excitement in not knowing what this chapter is and not knowing really who I am right now, and feeling the freedom and just like discovering it and not needing to define myself. I don't need to define who I am. I can be everything everywhere all at once. But sometimes maybe an identity is just true for a season, and it doesn't have to be forever, or it's something that just continues to add to this ever-changing version of yourself. Which kind of leads me to my next point. Why does reinvention often feel like failure instead of a gateway to something new? I used to think that changing your mind meant you had failed at your original plan. And now I'm starting to actually wonder if changing your mind is actually proof that you're listening to yourself. And that this idea of failing because you didn't want to do it anymore has really started to shift for me. And it came up really strongly in therapy recently. I had shared in my last therapy session a lot of fears I have around the podcast failing and what that looks like. And I think those, who listen to this podcast very regularly understand how important this is to me, and how this creative pursuit, by far over anything I've done, feels the most in line with what I'm doing. It feels the most creatively aligned, energetically aligned. And I just really do believe in my heart of hearts that this will lead to something. Because I think when you're misaligned, it doesn't. But when you feel aligned, surely it has to lead to something more. But sometimes the little failure monster comes in, as I like to call them. And I started to reflect with my therapist on what failure meant to me. And I had such an interesting discovery. As I was kind of talking through this, out of nowhere, I started to feel these tears start to well. And I felt myself saying words that I didn't even think in my head. It was like these words were falling out of me. And I remember being like, I can't believe I'm going to say this. And it kind of just fell out. And I said, I feel like I've failed at everything I've done creatively. And acting was a really big part of this. And with acting, I did choose to step aside from it. But sometimes I think within all of that, I wondered if I stepped aside because I felt like I was just over failing. And I do think I also stuck with it for a really long time because I felt this pressure that I had committed to doing it for so long that I had to be successful. And it was really hard to figure out if I was acting because I said I was going to, or if I was really acting for myself. And I think when I did make the decision to stop, I did feel a weight of relief. But there are still times when I miss it because I did love it. I did love it. It is such a liberating feeling when you're like deep in a character and you're just letting everything out. And I really miss that freedom that you would feel when you're like in a role. And not to mention all the fucking script ideas I have in my phone that I need to eventually just pick one and turn into something. But I feel like it's something that I keep telling myself, like a chapter isn't necessarily closed. If there's still that draw and love for it, maybe it's something I come back to at another stage. And right now, like what is calling me is this format and what I'm doing here. But I think the power is really allowing myself, which I did, to step aside despite the fear of failure, But I think what I didn't know was how much of that sadness and anger I was holding towards it. But I think it was just really fascinating. Fascinating. Jeffrey says I always say fascinating in the podcast, but it was interesting to see this deep grief and anger that I had around failing creatively. And I remember like just all these tears came out, and I was like, why is it that my creative pursuits have always felt so much harder to be successful at than anything else? And it's still something I'm unraveling. I'm in the moment of figuring this out, but I think it's important to share because I think your relationship to failure is a huge part of the reinvention process. And I think that also happens in our 30s. I think there's a select few people in their 20s that are not scared of failing, and props to them, but I think a lot of us are. And if you can get over that fear, and I think that fear starts to diminish the older you get because you just give less of a shit. But if you can get over the fear of failing and even how you define failure, because we all define failure in very different ways. I think if you can get past that, it opens the door to a whole new area of growth and personal freedom. And I keep telling myself, ultimately, you can only fail if you try. And I would much prefer to be the person that tried, that sat there, then sat there and did nothing. And I think as I'm going through this transition, another part of it is I'm asking myself a lot scarier questions. I found my 20s were often just about proving that I could build a life and be an adult, while my 30s are asking whether I actually want to live inside this life that I started to build, and if I'm happy with the person, aka me, inside that life. And not in a dark way. It's more just like, is this like the type of life that I want for myself? Is this like, am I living in the right type of, like energetic path in a way? And I think that's why I felt very ungrounded this year, because I'm not asking tiny questions. I'm asking these really big foundational ones. I'm asking myself, where do I want to live? What kind of pace do I want in life? What actually brings me joy? What kind of community do I want? What does success look like? How do I want to structure my life? What does home mean to me when my family is everywhere and my life is here? And I don't have the answers yet. And that's been the hardest part. But what has been the most liberating is giving up on the idea that I need to have the answers for these things. Because I think life is not a 5-year plan, and it's never going to be filled with clean answers. I think the reinvention starts in the kind of mud, in the fog, in the unknown. And you kind of feel the discomfort before you kind of discover the direction you want to go in. And I just have continued to tell myself that you have to trust that by listening to yourself and even exploring these thoughts, it's going to lead to something new and having these questions answered in a way that you might not even realize. Which ultimately is what kind of, through all of this, what I need and what I've been leaning into, because I think you need an anchor. And the anchor through all this change is connection. And I keep coming back to connection and this idea of connection, because when everything feels ungrounded, my close people are the people that ground me. And I know from personal experience that home is not just a place that you were born, and it's not the place that you've lived the longest. To me, home is wherever the people who make me feel seen and loved are with me. And I chase those destinations because I have those people here in New York and all over the world. My family's all over the world. My closest friends are all over the world. And I chase those destinations to feel emotionally safe, no matter where they are. And I think these people can really hold you through the reinvention process and remind you of yourself. And I did really feel that last year. For those who listened to season 1, I went to India in October, and I was feeling really unsettled at the time. And my mom was taking my sister and I and a group of her yoga students there. She does these yoga retreats there every few years. And I went with mom, and my aunt met us there, and her daughter, who's my cousin, and my sister and I. And just the joy I had of 2 weeks being in one of the most incredible countries. Love, 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 love India. But being with just people that love me and see me and have known me for so long. It was so healing. And I think that just shows that, when you start to feel unsettled, just find the people who settle you and who know you. And then also just for me, it was the spiritual element, and the food felt very healing. Everything was incredible. But really, as I wrap things up, here we go. I'm going to leave you with this. I think maybe being a New Yorker is not about being born here. Maybe being a New Yorker is about letting the city change you and giving something back of yourself to it while it does. And I think that's kind of the truth of really every identity we carry as well. There's the city girl, at least for me, the actress girl, the party girl, the girl who moved halfway across the world with one suitcase and decided she was going to build a life from scratch. The girl who thought chaos meant freedom. The girl who thought changing her mind meant failing. I don't think any of those versions disappear. They just become part of the archive of who I am. And what I'm learning is that reinvention does not arrive in this neat, beautifully wrapped with tissue paper package that's delivered to your doorstep. I think it arrives as discomfort and as fog and as unknown. And you just have to keep asking yourself these questions, even if you don't have the answers. Where do I belong? What do I want? What still fits? What should I leave behind? And I think even if you don't have the answers, just asking those questions, you'll start to see things shifting. And I really do think the best thing we can do is just come back to the moment that we're in and the people who make us feel seen while we're changing. FaceTiming your family under a bridge in Brooklyn at a rave and seeing the joy on their faces, spending time with your friends who knew the old version of you, but they have room for the new version, and giving thanks to the city that raised you, even if you weren't born there. And I think my final point is that you are allowed to outgrow things. And even if they once brought you joy, you don't have to continue with it. And stopping something isn't a failure. All these things add different layers to who we are. And I feel ultimately what I just keep telling myself is just try and tune into what feels right for you and keep following that path. And I think that's leading to the reinvention. So we will see. And I'd love to know if other people are feeling this, because I swear to God, this is a thing that's happening. I'm noticing a few people who are feeling this in their 30s, this kind of like ungrounded, unsettled feeling. And I'm surely not the only one who's going through this. So other people, please reach out and share with me. And as always, as we wrap up Note to Self this week, please share the podcast with your friends. I love you guys. I love doing this. And I am going to go and finish my week. Bye, guys.